Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Today, we are talking about should you mulch now for spring crops, fitting brassicas into the rotation, and one thing that often gets forgotten in a farm business plan. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday is brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil, and it's officially their pre-sale season for the 2026 growing season. So check that out at tilthsoil.com/farmers to get a pretty sweet deal on potting mix for next season. Link will be in the show notes. I hope everyone is having a nice start to your week so far. Still very cold here, but not quite as cold as it was. And that is going to change anyway into something more along the lines of hoodie weather for the holidays, or really just muddy weather. But anyway, that temperature's maybe more my speed, frankly, so I'm good with that. I did indeed get all my seeds sorted yesterday, which is not much of a filmable project, I guess, but I got a little spreadsheet with some initial notes down, and then over the next few days, I will nail down the crop plan and start getting that, seed order together. Now, I should say, if you're not there yet in your, crop planning and seed ordering stuff, you're fine. December is always just my best window for like knocking these things out. I mean, at one point, we wouldn't really order seeds, at least not in bulk, until January. So you've got time. And even then, sometimes we would just order our spring seeds in January, and then we would do another order later on. The only thing is you miss out on some varieties when you do that, because some things will go out of stock. COVID kind of changed my perspective on that. But for the most part, I haven't seen much of what I need go out of stock recently. So that's good. Anyway, here's a question. Should you mulch now for spring crops? Obviously, the answer to this will depend on a number of different factors. The first is what condition the garden is in right now. If there is no garden, if you're just, looking at starting a farm from scratch, in other words, the answer may be different than if you do have an established garden and it's just, spending the winter fallow or with some, just residual lingering crop residue. Also, another factor is the type of mulch that you have access to: hay, straw, leaves, compost, etc. That will play a role in whether or not you should do it now or later. Then, of course, goals. Like, you're not going to want to put hay down where you plan to plant, say, carrots, because of the potential weed seeds. So I may just run through some individual scenarios where you may and may not want to mulch right now. And if you all have an additional scenario or two you want to pitch my way, then we'll tackle those later, probably on Friday. Feedback Friday, that's what we do there. On the side of reasons to potentially mulch, if there is not a mulch down right now, is just to keep the soil in place. If the soil is bare right now, it's susceptible and it's just going to be losing carbon and nutrients over the winter, as well as soil particles themselves. This is a scenario you may want to mulch, unless, of course, it plans to just stay covered in, snow all winter. Then it's probably not necessary. However, a scenario where you may not want to mulch is if the only mulch you have access to is lightly colored mulch and you want to plant those beds early. That mulch can cool your soil down, so you may want to rethink it, or alternatively plan to rake the mulch off or tarp over to help heat up the soil below the mulch, or both. The one thing you generally want to avoid, in other words, is extending your winter, which the mulch will do by regulating the temperatures. Unless, of course, you're in a really warm climate, when extending the winter may be actually a good thing. Now, for sure, I have said this before, but thinking that hay and straw mulch is the answer in every context, that just putting that mulch down will not only help make the soil workable, which it will do over time, but be a perfect weed suppressant is all well and good. But if you're in a colder climate, it will push your season back a fair bit, because those lightly colored mulches will simply keep the soil cooler, which tomatoes, don't love. Now, if it's compost mulch, that's a slightly different story. Compost mulch will not cool the soil to quite the same degree, and moreover, it is a ready-to-go planting surface in the spring when the temperatures get higher, meaning it won't take any soil prep. You can just, throw your seeds and or plants into the mulch and roll with that. Compost is cool that way. Now, obviously, it can be quite the challenge getting through a muddy garden at this time of year to spread any sort of mulches. So in some cases, if you plan to use, say, wood chips in the pathways, it's best to get those down first and then mulch over top of the beds. That way, you are not having to work with mud on the boots, which is a cruel, cold, heavy state of existence. If you don't have a garden yet and you're hoping to get a mulch down over a lawn and then be able to plant into that in the spring, well, it can work to some extent, especially if by spring you mean June, but it can take, mulch a little while to decompose a sod or whatever existing vegetation might be there, especially in the cold. And also, as always, do some good site site evaluation first, so you're not just mulching over lifeless compacted clay. In other words, you may want to do some work in the soil first to get it ready to take on whatever crop, a task that may not be possible if your soil is frozen and or wet right now. A big portion of making this sort of decision will be what you plan to do with that area as well. Again, if you plan to plant early, maybe there's a better way, like perhaps a tarp, to lock down the soil than, say, straw. Or if you don't plan to use it until the summer, maybe a cover crop actually makes more sense than, certain mulches, or certainly more than no mulch at all. And maybe that's not something you can do when it is 2 degrees outside, like it was here this week. But for some of you, you're having mild winters so far, and if you planted peas and Lacey Phacelia right now, it would take a while to germinate, but would give you a lovely spring flowering cover crop, or at least it would here in Zone 6B. It's also an easier one to terminate, so you could be planting into that area by June. I will still be doing some mulching and cover cropping soon. Literally, I will be putting in some Lacey Phacelia, cilantro, and maybe some crimson clover in that mix to have some nice spring flowers in a bed I've got. And I've also got some areas that are begging for some leaves, in fact. So that's also on the agenda for when December calms the heck down. Finally. Anyway, let me know any other thoughts or considerations about this particular topic. Otherwise, we will take a quick break and then talk about squeezing brassicas into the crop plan. Just like, get in there. BRB.
Yeah, g'day nerds. We're at Parksbourne in New South Wales, Australia. We're planting some pumpkins today. I'm using sheet mulch method. That's a commercial, organically certified compost we're putting on top. Using the star pickets to weigh down the cardboard and give me a really nice level that I can use the rake to get about 25 mil of compost on top of that. Looks great.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does this show bring you $2 worth of value a month? $5? You can support it there. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Chris Main, who asks, quote, I am a relatively new CSA farmer wrapping up year 2 right now. Congrats, Chris. For year 3, I will be able to cut my hours back at my day job, which will just be a tremendous boon for the farm. I'm farming in Town, that's fun to say, Arkansas, on the border between 6B and 7A. My biggest struggle so far has been figuring out how the heck to fit brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, into my crop rotation. Next year, I'm going to try to get spring brassicas in and out before my squash needs to go in, and then another round of fall brassicas in those same beds. Do you have a better place for them in the rotation? Merci de m'avoir éduqué durant mon début à l'agriculture. D'une francophile à une autre. He says, thank you for educating me while I'm getting started in agriculture from one francophile to another, end quote. All right, you're welcome, and thank you for the great question. So in the South, brassicas are tough for a lot of reasons. Most of them heat, humidity, hot nights, and even hotter days. But on the other side of that is just crop rotation. You're in a similar zone as my own, and so I know that our seasons are just about long enough to get around in before our main summer crops, but not quite. And then they are a little too hot or for too long to make the fall crops very easy. But anyway, the specific rotation you suggest here is spring brassica, summer cucurbit, fall brassica. Now, I don't necessarily think this is bad, though having the same crop family in the same area in the same year is generally not ideal, in terms of an approach to disease and pest management, even though I do see sometimes people suggest using brassicas after brassicas because they, cultivate the same fungi or whatever. Not something I would recommend risking, definitely not in a warm climate. Without knowing what all you grow or on what scale, here are some general thoughts to consider. Spring brassicas are going to occupy your beds until mid-June, most likely if not longer, and your fall brassicas, based on that list, probably need to go in sometime by late July there, maybe. That's a pretty tight turnover for the crops that you suggested, assuming you mean a summer squash and not a winter squash. A winter squash would definitely be really tight, in terms of a turnaround from that into a fall brassica. So what I might suggest is finding 2 different areas to grow your fall and spring brassicas, but place them around longer season crops. Like the spring brassicas could come before a winter squash, but the fall brassica could follow spring potatoes or onions or even the garlic. Or the spring brassica could come before summer lettuce, which is perhaps a better combo than the winter squash because lettuce is a light feeder. And the fall brassicas could come after spring carrots or beets or something like that. In crop rotation, we do generally want to pair heavier feeders like brassicas with lighter ones, though if you do have a good fertility program and healthy soil and adequate water, it's kind of less important. It just really better maximizes and utilizes any fertility that you put down. So if you put down a bunch of fertility, whatever, compost or whatever you're going to use, and then you plant around a broccoli, that same amount of fertility will still help grow something like lettuce or green onions or something that isn't quite as heavy of a feeder. But if you put another heavy feeder on there, you're going to have to also add that fertility. So you're just not maximizing that compost or blood meal or whatever amendments you used. Anyway, does that give you any good ideas? My preference has long been to follow our spring potatoes with a quick buckwheat cover crop and then fall brassicas, or you could do that same thing, like after garlic, which I mentioned, though that is usually where I put my winter squash, but brassicas could work as well. Or something along those lines, but I could see a lot of different options there. So yeah, I hope that's somewhat helpful. Let us know your thoughts, dear watchers and listeners. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, the thing that often gets left out of the farm plan, be right back. I really want to lounge, just like this. This is what I want to do. Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. Today's episode is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, so something that has been on my mind lately, especially in the winter when it seems people are, start scheming their farms together, is something that often gets left out of the farm business plan. I've talked a little bit about this before, but it is not something anyone ever really told me about. And, like when we were starting our farm business, and it's simply that I think there needs to be a small community element built into the farm plan, like 5-year goals, 10-year goals, community goals. Now, this community goals thing, it's not idealistic, I'm going to explain, but it could mean a lot of different things, right? But essentially asks the question, how are you going to build and or engage with your community through your farm? So that could be something simple like doing, the local farmers market or offering a local CSA. I think those things are fair game and simple ways to engage with the community, but it could also be having, events or dinners on the farm, having an on-farm store, sponsoring local soccer leagues. Okay, that one may be a little bit specific to us, but you get the idea. But why? Why bother with this particular element? Well, the value of community is that it builds resiliency into your farm. If you support the community around you, it is more likely to support you in times of need, like floods or whatever it may be. But this community piece doesn't have to cost money, like, a soccer league sponsorship, and can very well be a more profitable approach to a farm business than driving an hour to a good market. What I mean is that travel costs money, right? Gas, time, vehicle maintenance, market fees, all the things. So the more local the approach, the lower the overhead costs. To me, the ideal scenario is that if your food never has to travel at all, like that the customer comes to you and picks it up on the farm, so all you have to do is keep it cool and have it ready for them. So there's that. Thinking locally can just be good business. Moreover, people can be very important to yourself psychologically, just having them around in a business that is so incredibly isolating. It's nice to have people around who you know and can trust and can talk to and learn about their lives. It's fun to watch their kids grow up, fueled at least in part by your own food. The days where everyone had their banker, their grocer, family doctor, etc., are pretty well obliterated thanks to the Walmartification of the world, and then I guess now more the Amazonification of the world. But there is still both room for and desire for some of those people in our lives. And I love the idea or challenge of trying to be people's farmer. So indeed, I think it's important that we build a local goal into our farm plans, however you feel comfortable with that. And like I said, it doesn't have to be in some sort of arbitrary thing. Building community goals into your farm plan can help focus your market efforts, keep your farm small, and maybe even able to feed people locally who may not normally be able to afford your fresh local produce by not having to charge more for, say, the market fees, travel time, and all that stuff. And it can just be a profitable approach to having a farm business. Anyway, it's just a thought, and I'd love to hear what you all have to say about that. Otherwise, we're going to be done here for this Tilth Tuesday. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. I can see that we've got a few of those donations, and we really appreciate you all. You can learn more about how to do that and get your end of the year tax break in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Like, do you appreciate that we just give this information away for free? That anybody in the world can watch this, learn from this? Then you can support it by being a sponsor. So Farmer Michelle would like to hear from you. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, my wife Hannah for everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of December, you get a shout out on the show, but no shout outs today because there were no signups yesterday. Mondays are consistently the slowest sign up day, so I need to maybe come up with, like some ways to make Mondays a little bit more exciting. Maybe like Mastodon Mondays, and I'll just like take my pet Mastodon out, and we'll like take it on a walk or let it like farm or something. I have to get a pet Mastodon first. I think I don't know that those are still in existence, but yeah, I think that could maybe inspire folks. Anyway, we will hear what Mr. Lakes is up to tomorrow to continue that story. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.